Hey there, guys and gals. Welcome back to another episode of Ghost in the Cloud, your anime podcast. My name is John, and with me is Bridget.
Hey!
This week, we are going to discuss the ancient Magus's bride. That's what
John likes to call it the ancient Haggis's bride.
I said that once, and now they don't let it go. Once.
It's going to be on a t-shirt.
You say something once, and it's with you forever.
Forever.
That's your life lesson of the week, guys.
Yes.
But before we get into it, we do have a little bit of news this week. So, Bridget.
So, Fate Stay Night has a spin-off gourmet series that debuted online on January 25th. And the first episode of the anime already aired in Japan during a Fate Project special on December 31st. Will this Fate Stay Night meet Food War be something totally new, or it would be kind of like a knockoff of Food Wars? We'll see. You know, even if it is, I'll be happy with it because I love Food Wars. Aniplex of America will begin streaming the series on Crunchyroll January 25th. So it started a couple days ago. Give it a look soon and we'll talk about it. New episodes will be on the first of every month.
I think this is an interesting idea. I like the idea of like food shows. Like, I love Food Wars. I think it's really cool. I think it's really different. It's weird that they would take these characters.
Yes, that's
like
weird.
It doesn't seem like it would fit, but I'm interested in seeing what
maybe they'll make it work. Or maybe we won't care because they'll be talking about food.
If anybody's watching it, reach out to us. Let us know because we'd love to get some differing opinions for sure.
Yeah. I mean, one thing's for sure. Whenever we're watching anime, and Blake says this too, the food always looks amazing. The cartoon food looks fantastic. So I'd be happy if there was 50 more shows talking about food. So we'll see. We'll see how it goes.
All right. Let's jump into it. The Ancient Magus's Bride is a Japanese fantasy shonen manga series written and illustrated by Kore Yamazaki. The anime television series adaptation premiered this past October. It's currently ongoing with a total of 15 or 16 episodes so far, and a 3-part OVA which provides a backstory of Chisei's life. In a world of magic and fairies, Chisei, a teenage girl known as a Sleigh Beggy in the magical community, is bought during an auction by an ancient mage, Elias Ainsworth. Having never really known a home, she becomes part of Elias's household and begins apprenticing under him. Her immense power will unfortunately cut Chisei's life short. Together they learn from one another in an attempt to prolong Chisei's life, as Elias hopes one day she will be his bride. It's a really strange concept for a show. The main character, you get right off the bat her troubles in life, like the things that she's dealt with. Like, that's the OVA. It goes into her backstory, a random story of how she sort of stumbled into magic.
Yeah, I mean, she had a really sad upbringing, and it's kind of crazy to think that she cared so little about her life that she allowed herself to be auctioned off. She did that voluntarily. Before we go any further, the word of the week is ancient, and ancient in Japanese is kodai. And that was a really good choice, John. It wasn't a cop-out. I'm really happy.
No, it wasn't. Sometimes I do good. Sometimes I do good.
You do good. So what drew us to the show? I'd really like to start with this topic of discussion every week because I feel like what gets us started in the first place is interesting. The color of this animation is just... Every time I saw a picture of the show pop up, I was just really drawn to it. It's just so beautifully drawn. And I heard good things about it, but just the premise of it is just so interesting. It's because it's weird. I can't decide if it's weird in a good way or a bad way, but it's different and it's refreshing. So that's what drew me in the first place. And once I started watching it, I thoroughly enjoyed it.
Yeah, so, I mean, shows about magic isn't anything new in the anime community, but this taking from, like, those classic kind of stories about magic and like wizardry and stuff like that. It almost feels to me like it's something out of like a Lord of the Rings. Yeah. You know, like it's got like these, an older time. It has these fairies and yeah, exactly, like an older time.
Yes. The
main draw of this anime, and the story itself's not bad, but I think the main draw is definitely the artistry, the illustration itself. Like everything, there's so much detail put into every little thing in each scene.
When I first started watching, it was like only a few episodes in, and there was a creature in the show that chased after Chisei that looked just like No Face. It kind of hit me because I was like, this show, it does kind of remind me a little bit of Miyazaki's work because they also just take so much time in their illustration. Everything's just so beautifully done, and it kind of had that just attention to detail, I thought. The premise of the show, I feel like is not as put together as a Miyazaki piece, but I just felt the artwork was. And when I saw that no-face creature, I thought, maybe Miyazaki was part of their inspiration.
Magic is rampant in this world, but not everyone can sort of see it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, most people can't see it.
But those who can aren't necessarily afraid of it. They're surprisingly accepting, especially when you come to like some of the character choices they have in the show and the character design, so to say.
Mm.
The character Elias, and he is literally like a creature, from what we know so far, like essentially born from magic. We don't know where he's come from. He's got a mix of both fairy, which we mentioned earlier, and like a little bit of human, as well as like these other parts. He doesn't look human.
His body
he's almost demonic in a way. Like, honestly,
I wouldn't be surprised if he was somebody's experiment. Like somebody took a human and used their magic, almost like a homunculus. Homunculus. Say that 10 times fast.
Homunculus.
No. But yeah, I feel like, and he obviously, when he first, I guess, came to be, like he had no memory of what happened. For all we know, he volunteered himself, but I feel like there was something not right about like his creation, and all the like creatures like fairies, they kind of look down on him and fear him a little bit. They kind of shun him away.
You don't really understand why, so to say. He's definitely different. He's a very powerful magical creature. Not to say that there aren't others that are more powerful, but the look of him is quite intimidating. So he takes on a human form in the sense that like his body looks human-like. He's monstrously tall, though. Like, he's got to be 7 foot easy. Yeah. It's his face that kind of draws you. It looks like a skull, mutated antelope-like creature.
Yeah, it's got the horns of an
He's got this long, almost dinosaur-like skull face. And then he has these twisting horns that shoot off the top of his head. And it's very strange. And, like, when he talks, his mouth doesn't always move to, like, the words. It's very interesting. But he's not a bad guy in any way. He's just different, and he's trying to understand.
Have feelings. I think that's the thing.
Well, yeah,
they claim he does not have feelings.
One of the themes throughout the show is sort of just discovering your humanity. Like Elias, he buys Chisei. Chisei is being sold, essentially, I guess, as slave labor.
And yet she did it voluntarily because she did not care what happened to herself.
She has like very little self-respect.
Yeah, no worth at all. She didn't really want to go on. She seemed very depressed and maybe even potentially suicidal. So she just, someone said, well, if you don't care what happens. So since she didn't care about her own life, someone kind of intervened and said, well, if you don't care, can we do this? Can we auction you off? Knowing that she was very valuable. And she just went along with it. She did not care. And I think she was very fortunate for Elias to stroll in there and buy her very, very high. How much did he spend?
Oh, I don't know.
He spent millions. Like, he just went in there, highest bidder, just strolled out like a boss. And everyone's just like, wait, what? Knowing full well that she was a Sleigh Beggy. And how about that name, Sleigh Beggy?
It's such a ridiculous name.
It's hard to get my head around it, Sleigh Beggy, and not really still having like a full understanding of it, but she just has a lot of power coursing through her. But as just an average human, it's just too much for her body, and it takes a toll on her. So they're just expected to have a short life expectancy because of that. So they're trying to get around that. Sleigh Beggy. It sounds I don't know.
Strange. So you follow Chisei throughout her sort of magical training. Like that's what Elias wants her for. Like he wants to train her in the magical arts. You get the sense that like he wants her as his bride, but like I don't think he understands what that really means.
I don't think he does.
I think he's really just trying to understand his place in the world and find companionship.
I think he's gotten to the point where he's been alone for so long, and he wants to kind of tap into his human side. He wants to understand feelings. So that's when he called Chisei his human teacher and asked her to teach him about human feelings and just try to understand like compassion and these things that are still pretty foreign to him. But I think one thing that makes the show very interesting is that people go off saying that he doesn't have feelings, but some of the things that he says makes you believe that he does deep down. Like he's like, when you're gone, it's so empty here, it's dark and cold, but when you're here, everything lights up. Like that, when it's describing something that she doesn't actually light up the room, it's something that you feel. So I think that maybe on some deep level, he does have the feelings, they're very buried and misunderstood. He doesn't know how to use them.
In the house of Elias, you have 2 other characters that become part of the story.
Yes.
And you're starting to get a little backstory into them. That's Ruth. Ruth is a former former person, a former human being, that it was turned into I think they describe it as a fairy, but he's not a fairy in the sense of what you would normally think. He becomes this black dog, and the black dog represents a watchful character that is always on guard and stuff like that, and he ends up becoming Chisei's familiar. So like anything that happens to Chisei also happens to him, and Chisei's life is constantly in danger.
Yes, and he
that's just sort of a running
was
thing
willing
with the show.
to be her familiar, knowing that if Chisei's life ends short, which it very likely will, then his will too.
It shows you the impact that this one random girl has on people and creatures alike. She has a very big heart. She doesn't want to be a burden to people. Like, she wants to literally like help them in any way she can. Like, she's just like a good, honest person.
Good person.
There's another character, Silver, in the show. She doesn't speak, and you find out why.
You find it, well, I just want to add for listeners, if you're watching the show and you're not completely caught up, it was in the most recent episode they finally give us the background of Silver. And we're going to spoil the crap out of it, as usual, so just heads up, but I'm glad that we were able to watch that episode before recording, because I was like, oh, finally. And her backstory was also very interesting. What did they call her?
She's a banshee.
She's a banshee, that's what it was. I was like, ooh,
and
that sounds cool.
And the idea that they put forward in this show is that banshees are these magical creatures that when they bond with a family or a person, those are the only people who can hear the banshee speak.
Yes.
And it's really sad. Like, it's not
really,
something like I would think prior to this, I never would have taken that concept of a banshee. Like, my thought of a banshee is this sort of like evil witch-like character that has this almost like deafening voice or scream that would like haunt people. And like here you have this very, very simple female girl who just wants to be involved and just wants to be part of something.
Yes, and when you get the flashback to her background, you see her just tears down her face sitting in the shell of what used to be a home, and it's already overgrown with trees and grass and no roof. So you imagine she has been there alone, waiting for this family to come back for decades. And she just, through chance and luck, is pointed in the direction of the home that she's in now that was occupied by a family.
Yeah, I kind of got the idea that her previous family was killed or died.
Or moved, and the house just... I mean, if they moved, maybe she would have went with them.
Yeah.
But yeah, who knows? That the house is just gone. Maybe it burned down. It was only the stone foundation left. And she was just really upset. And then, people kind of running across her like, oh, what are you doing? Why don't you go to this house here? This has a nice family in it. And then the person that ran into her transformed her into like what she is now, the beautiful dress and the bonnet, and put a big smile on her face, and then she is where she is today. And I was like, that's
sort of gave
sweet.
her like a
and like a new life almost. And it was the little fairy guide, that the guide of the king and queen of the fairy worlds. Like, I forgot his name because he's not very important, but he was the one who did it. So I was like, oh, that's cute.
You mentioned the fairy king and queen, so that's Oberon and Tatiana, and they're very Titania. Blah, blah, blah. They're interesting characters. Oberon is almost like centaur-like.
They had a really interesting backstory.
Where Tatiana is like...
Titania.
Sure. Is like... depicted as this like very scantily clad fairy character, and the concepts from the show almost feel like they come off of a painting or a story
or
out of a novel from like your past. It's very
which again makes me think of Miyazaki. They always the movies that I'm really fond of is that they were based on English novels, and here we have this story takes place in England, and it has that English feel to it. It has the rolling hills and the stone houses, but it takes place in England.
They do have an episode where Chisei is injured badly. Her body's not healing, so they take her to the fairy world. And in the fairy world, time passes
a lot slower.
That's where you also get a backstory for Silver, where like she's been alone now for years, months on end. They meet a character who's a fairy, who was originally lived in the human world, and just you get an idea of the hardships of all these different characters, and it's interesting. The show likes to paint pictures of various different points of view. Get like the humans who are scared of these magical beings. You get these magical beings who are in turn scared of these humans and like other things and things that they're afraid to lose.
Like they really show the heart of each character. Like the vampire that lived around the corner, Leanna, and she, like, when we think of vampires, we think of soul-sucking creatures. And here we have one that fell in love with a human, stayed with him till the day he died. Like, I really like how this show doesn't just give backstories of each characters, but, like, they really show their heart. They show that they are as human beings themselves. They have feelings, they have family. Each character is really given a lot of attention.
My favorite thing about the show, I think, is the fact that they take these concepts that have been around forever, vampires, magicians, fairies, and they twist them. They give them a nice, interesting, sort of updated version. They keep some of the norm so people are comfortable, like, with the character. You know, like, okay, I understand this vampire, so to say. Like, I get what a vampire does.
Yeah.
But this vampire is different. You find out that she has, like, these feelings and stuff like that, and it's interesting. Like, you get the Banshee character, Silver.
Yeah.
You know, my thoughts, as I said earlier, and then, like, you turn around, you get this very different character. I liked how this show manages to just sort of turn things a little bit on their head.
Yeah.
And present you with something familiar, but also something new. Yeah. That, I think, is its greatest strength. I don't think the story is extremely strong. I personally think they're trying to do too much. But you get Chisei's backstory, and the ultimate quest is to find a way to keep Chisei's life long. It seems like the artists and the storyboard guys are always just like, what can we show them today that will just make them go, wow. Like, it's more about the visual than it is about the depth, in my opinion, which isn't a bad thing, but I do think the story needs to be a little more concise about this show.
I mean, I love all these side stories with all the characters. They spend a lot of detail with them.
I don't disagree there.
But I think that, yeah, the main plot is kind of lost in all of that. I feel like they're, like you said, they're not focusing on the fact that she's slowly dying. And they did finally address it a little bit in the most recent episode where she's taken over to the fairy world. But still, I feel like it's just not there quite enough.
You know what the other thing is? They introduce a lot of characters. And they almost always introduce a new character every episode, or like close to it. So there's an episode where it's early on, they go to this town, and it's like the town of cats, right?
Yes,
and you find out that cats, the legend that cats have 9 lives is in fact true, but as they get into their 9th or 9th life, they learn how to understand and interact with the magical beings in the world.
They become more intelligent and more powerful with each.
And I'm just like, that's a cool concept, but you don't really get it again after that episode or two. You know what I mean? Like, I'm just like, I would like a little backstory on that.
There's so many creatures out there, and it's just, the magical world is just infinite. So I think that's what they're trying to show, that there's just so much out there. It's endless possibilities. What can they run into next? So maybe that's why they don't want to revisit characters. She's constantly moving forward, learning new things about the magical world, so she's encountering new creatures. One thing I find interesting, I think that they're kind of going for like a Beauty and the Beast kind of take on these two main characters, where from the very get-go and in the title of the show, like, she's called the bride, and yet first time I saw him, like, oh, he looks like a villain. Chisei is just so devoted to him that she has just unwavering faith that's been tested many times already, and she shows that she actually feels like she belongs somewhere, somebody actually wants to be with her, and her own mother didn't give her that. You have this odd relationship where they have these like awkward moments and kind of look like kids with crushes, the way they're kind of shy around each other, and she blushes, and they're, you know, they don't want to get too close, but I don't know, it has a Beauty and the Beast vibe to me.
It's nice because, like, they don't see it as physical, they see it as like an emotional connection. The depiction of these emotional connections you create with people and creatures that inhabit your life, and it's quite beautiful that way. There are a few characters I wouldn't mind getting more information on. Simon, who is the church priest, he kind of watches over Elias and his flock.
I'm sure they'll give him a backstory.
Before going any further, I do want to talk about Riichi Miura. He's this librarian from Chisei's past. He's part of the OVA. The way that this anime starts off,
it's brutal.
It's beautiful and it's brutal at the same time. After those 3 episodes, things change drastically, in my opinion. Those 3 episodes alone could start it on a whole separate path. Like, it could be a whole different anime. Because, like, she enters the woods one day, and she comes upon this magical library where Riichi is working. He's worked there for decades, and he's never aged. My thought is, that is a cool concept. You have this magical place filled with essentially infinite magical information. You have this little girl the time who just is enthralled and wowed by it. And she's just happy that she has a place to go. They could do a whole separate series just on
I think maybe that was their way of easing us into, like, the magical realm. Like, she was only kind of just starting to stumble on it. She was able to see some magical things, but she didn't quite understand it. The librarian had this one rule: always close the door, and to make sure you have your library card. I think they were just trying to ease us into what the magical world is all about.
And the consequences.
Yeah, but I feel like those first episodes, compared to the rest of the show, had a completely different feeling and pace to it. It was intense, it was beautiful, but really brutal at the same time. Now it's more of like a slow, calm pace.
I like this show quite a bit. I don't think it's in my top tier of favorite shows the past couple months. I don't think there's anything that could stop
as long as they stay focused on, like, the main plot. Like, I feel like he's like, here, this ring will slow down your life, but they didn't really address trying to find a solution.
Either stay on the main plot or do the random episodes about different magical creatures. Don't shoehorn in the main plot just to do it throughout the show. But I mean, that's just me. That's just my
I think they just need to show that they are still working on it. Like, they're still trying to address it. One thing that has me kind of wondering, the king and queen of the fairy world, Oberon and Titania, they're always trying to get her to stay in the fairy realm. And all the fairies too, they're always trying to lure her there. They're trying to get her to stay in the fairy world. I find it hard to believe that it's just for her well-being. Their argument was, well, you know, time passes a lot slower here, so she'll have more time to live while we try to help her find a way to get stronger.
Humans who stumble into the fairy world eventually become fairies themselves.
Right, so she's very powerful. Maybe they care about her well-being because they, you know, the one doctor there that was treating her said that fairies are naturally drawn and attracted to Sleigh Beggies. Maybe because it's all the power, but they're all over her, like, oh, hey, you're so cute, look at this. You know, they just have her undivided attention. I find it hard to believe, though, that's the sole reason. There's, like, some darker intent, I think, behind it. Like, I wouldn't be surprised if they had their own intentions for her to stay there.
It does seem like almost every character has unknown intentions for Chisei, but I mean, we'll see that as things go on.
Yeah, I mean, like, they seem really nice. They're really interesting. Maybe they're hoping she'll turn into a fairy herself, and who knows? But I don't really quite trust them.
They do introduce a few characters who are like the big bads of the show. At first, you get Michael Renfield and Alice, his apprentice. They're alchemists. You don't really get an idea of what the alchemists are capable of. They use a lot of potions, and they're not necessarily evil. These two in particular have issues with mages. They seem like pretty cool characters, and I'd be interested to see more of their story. Maybe not necessarily good, but also not necessarily evil. And then they introduce another character, and I'm going to botch this name. It's Carta Ohilius, otherwise known as Joe.
Carta Ohilius.
It's this ancient mage who looks like a child. Just sadistic, evil to the core, only satiated by its curiosity. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, and they even mention, like, this character is forever prone to walk the earth. The only thing that, like, drives this character is its curiosity. So it's constantly, like, testing people and ends up being bad for them. I'm looking forward to a big showdown with that character.
When he was in the cat village, that was another part where it kind of got dark again with the killing of the cats, which, by the way, I have to say was really hard for me to watch.
You never quite know what direction it's going in.
Overall, I mean, I love the show. It's not one of my favorites, but one thing I noticed, John, is that you keep saying, I want to know more about this character. I want to see more of this character. It's safe to say that all the characters that present, they're well-made, well-rounded characters. They have really interesting backstories, and it kind of lures you in and makes you want to see more. So ever since I started watching the show, I'm just like, I want more, I want more. Everything that they've shown, even if it's not pieced the best, way together, maybe the story's not as neat and organized as it could be, I feel like everything that they still present to us in the pieces are still solid and really enjoyable.
As beautiful to watch as this show is, I don't think it's got its hooks in me yet. Like, I don't really need to watch more.
You spent the whole episode saying you wanted to know more about all these characters.
Yeah, like, I if I'm gonna watch the show, I hope they develop these characters, but the biggest draw for the show, I think, is just the imagery. And
yeah, it's so pretty. And they have talking cats. I mean, come on.
Yeah.
Just kidding. I loved the first intro song. I thought it was different. It was really catchy, and I love this like old English like tea house kind of thing going on. She had like Silver has like a very Victorian era outfit, and I mean, just for the artwork alone, I'll continue watching it. But I do find the characters to be really interesting, and I'm really curious what happens between the two main characters. But honestly, the relationship between these two characters is like the least interesting part. I find it's nice. It's very cute. I'm glad that they don't push it too far and it kind of stays where it is. But I find everything else going on, like with all these magical characters, I find them the most interesting.
I'd love to know if you guys feel the same way about the main story as I do. Chise's physical well-being is not something... Every time she's injured, I don't feel dread when all the other characters are feeling dread. Like, I don't feel like there are stakes.
I'm not as worried about her when she gets sick either. I don't know if it's because I'm heartless and incapacitated and not compassionate, but no, I think it's because, we're expecting it and we knew it was going to happen because she's a Sleigh Beggy and they keep saying, oh, she's going to die early, she's going to die, so it's not a surprise.
I guess that's
And
true.
it's happened a lot. It's hard for me to care when it happens so much, but that is part of being a Sleigh Beggy, so it has to happen frequently. She has to get sick a lot. But yeah, I'm at the point where I'm like, okay, I get it, but I want to know more about these things and I want to know more about this character. I mean, if they're gonna keep showing her getting sick, then they should probably address... She needs a permanent solution to her Sleigh Beggy issue. Like, either remove the magic from her or strengthen her body or give her a new body if that's possible. I don't know. But if they're going to spend so much time showing this girl getting sick, they need to address the main plot more, in my opinion. But yeah, so overall, I would give this like a solid like 7.5. Are we doing that?
Okay, we can do
We did that last week with Blake.
Yeah, we did that last week.
Like...
Well, that's his fault, the bastard.
No, I feel like if we're gonna give a review on a show, we can throw a number on it. As long as you explain why, I would think. It's just so well done. It's so beautiful. The main story is a little mixed up, a little lost, I think. I'm gonna continue watching it, and I look forward to seeing what happens. And then maybe when the season's done, we'll do like a little extra and kind of recap and talk about the direction that they went in. Next week, we are doing Your Lie in April. What?
Do it without it.
Did you hide my sheet?
Nah, just do it. I want to see if you can do it without it.
Oh my goodness. I have like a nice neat sheet of like everything that I list off, all our social medias, and John hit it. Okay.
I'm curious if you could do it.
Fine. Don't forget, you can email us at gitcanime@gmail.com. Our episodes are always up on iTunes, SoundCloud, and Google Play. But also, they are now on YouTube. So you can find the link to our YouTube in our episode description, and you can subscribe. And we're also hoping, as a future project, we're going to start adding some fun videos, side projects, and other fun things. So not episode show related, but we will have other videos up soon. And then we also have our social media. We have Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. If you love our show and you want to help support our show, please check out our Patreon account. You can subscribe, you can have this different tiers, and there's some really cool perks on there. So you can also get extra episodes.
We're also in the process of getting more of those extra episodes out. So expect a few over the next couple
we
weeks.
have a couple coming out very soon. So it's like 99% done, but we have a website now. So if you want to check it out, it is gitcanime.com.
When you check out our SoundCloud, also remember Bridget puts together a
You're crushing
soundtrack of all music that you can find on these shows and movies that we do.
Oh,
so
yeah.
check that out, because why not?
The music in this show, I really like it.
Remember
But
it,
every
so-
week, that's okay. I make a playlist, and I do it on SoundCloud, but I share a link to it on Facebook and Twitter. If you don't have Twitter, a really nice feature on our website, on the news page, you can actually see our most recent tweets, and you can, if there's images, you can click on it and see the image and everything. So you don't have to have all these social media accounts. You can see it under one umbrella, our website. But yeah, if you like the music as much as I do, I mean, the music is such a big part of the show, so how can I not share it?
Thank you to our patrons. Thank you to Anthony for our theme song. You can check him out at What's Your Fortune on iTunes. And thank you all for listening. We really appreciate it. Get in touch with us. We'd love to know what you think of our show, how we can improve, what kind of shows you'd like us to take a look at. And,
yeah, we'll take requests. We were talking with one of our listeners. He chose the next big franchise that we're going to be covering once we're done with Dragon Ball, and it is Pokemon.
Thanks, 20 years of freaking show to catch up on. Really appreciate that.
And yet, to this day, you're on Pokemon Go every day.
Yeah, just about. We're going to start
I'm
tackling
really
that
excited
once
about
we're done with Dragon Ball, which we're almost done.
Yeah, we're we're going through Dragon Ball really quick. Like, we're almost done with Dragon Ball. We're going to be starting Dragon Ball Z soon, and then we'll make our way up to Dragon Ball Super.
Yeah, it may be a little while, but yeah, we'll try and shoehorn some stuff in there as we go.
Yeah, I think we have a nice pace going. We're doing pretty good.
We will talk to you next week.
Bye.
Oh.
What?
Crap.
Yes.
Find the show on Crunchyroll. Bye.
Oh, that's right. We mentioned it's on Crunchyroll.
Yeah.
I mean, it's always on Crunchyroll.
It's really early. All I had was tea and a smoothie. I'm really tired.
John's not a morning person, but I am. I was up, and I did my yoga routine, and I cleaned up the kitchen a little bit,
tired.
and then I took a shower, and then...
Well, let's go. End of show.